Hello everyone, welcome and thank you so much for watching. My name is Sarah with encc and today I'm just going to talk a bit about neurodiversity and being neurodivergent and processing. So neurodiversity as a whole just means brain differences. So just by having a brain, you are a part of neurodiversity. Now, to promote neurodiversity is the idea of promoting that we all think differently and that we should be supporting that and embracing that to have a rich, fulfilling society. So one of the things that I am personally fascinated about with neurodiversity is the idea that we all fundamentally think different right at its very base when we are processing in our everyday how we take things in. And I think that this is something that we often don't think about, that we often just assume that, how we interact with ourselves in our own internal world is the same way that other people are interacting with themselves in their internal world. And I think that does us all a massive disservice because we assume that people are fundamentally understanding us, and we are also assuming that we are fundamentally understanding others. And this has created massive disconnects where people just really aren't understanding each other and can't understand why that is. So one of the things that I find most fascinating is the idea of internal monologues and visual minds. So the current research as of now suggests that the majority of people have some degree of both, that they can see things in their mind, picture it, and also talk to themselves in their head. So that is a visual mind and an internal monologue. Now, when you start to become neurodivergent in these studies would be the outliers, the ones who don't fit into that kind of box and category very nicely. I would not fit into that neurotypical kind of box. So for me, I actually don't have a visual mind. No matter how hard I think about something, I will never be able to see it in my head. Now, I always say that it feels like one of the voices in my head must be able to see something, because the most I can get is one of my voices will describe the scene to me. So if you were to ask me to picture an apple, one of my voices would kind of just start describing everything I know to be factual about an apple. Now, on the flip side of that, my sister does not have an internal monologue, cannot talk to herself in her head whatsoever, but has a very, very intense visual mind. So she can see things as like videos playing through, different pictures coming through, things are color coordinated, scents are color coordinated in her head, which is just so fascinating to me as someone who I can't even fathom what that would look like. How would I access a color coordinated system in my brain? And again, that thought of not having an internal monologue, not being able to talk to yourself, when for me, I have the opposite problem where it's not one voice. I can have 5 different me's coming in and talking all at once. And if I'm not taking my meds that day, then that is extremely overwhelming and extremely chaotic. And again, knowing that is something that is incredibly important for other people who interact with me to understand, why sometimes when I am in my head, it can be very, very overwhelming for somebody to come and start talking to me because they can just be that 6th voice, when they're just trying to help calm me down and help concentrate, but really they're just adding to the chaos. So one of the things that really made me want to start exploring my own mind and how it works is actually the Disney movie Inside Out. I super related, and the way they depicted the emotions, that really resonated with me, and it's felt like that's been what's been happening in my brain sometimes, is this internal battle. But again, not everybody who watched the film kind of had that experience. And for me, only having my experiences, that seemed kind of wild. That how could you watch that movie and not feel that? And again, that led me to start researching and exploring and learning more about how different brains process. And one of the things that I have learned throughout my own journey and through unpacking is that I have used my multiple voices as a means to help me compartmentalize and help me mask overall. So masking, for those who aren't aware, is the act of suppressing and covering up and trying to hide different parts of who you are in order to fit in with other people. So occasionally we do this to be, helpful, just good people. When we run into somebody who we don't like, we mask in those situations because we wouldn't be good citizens to just start a fight in the middle of Sobeys. But when that gets to a point where you are day in and day out suppressing parts of who you are and hiding them and not allowing them to come out for fear of not being liked or accepted or valued, that takes a huge weight on you, and over time it really wears you down and can actually lead to a lot of long-term health issues. So a lot of people who are neurodivergent really, really struggle with masking, and a lot of times spend the majority of their lives masking to some extent, and it often results in high rates of burnout for ADHD and autistic adults. Personally, my voices allowed me to compartmentalize and mask a lot longer, because I would see them as being, these different parts of me that were all very real and valid. But I use this part of me for this situation, and this part of me for this situation, and this part of me for this situation. And while that can be a very positive thing, what that also means is, in this situation, I'm suppressing these parts of myself. And in this situation, I'm suppressing these parts of myself. And when you do that in every single part of your life, you never actually let anybody understand you, and you can never truly be yourself. So for me, that was a hard kind of thing to learn, that, compartmentalizing can be a coping skill that you can implement in certain situations. It is not a long-term solution. And it actually can lead to a lot more intense concerns with your mental health. And for me, I think one of the things that resulted in was a massive disconnect from my own internal world and my own internal thoughts and feelings. So recently I started working on connecting with my emotions. So one of the things that my own personal masking has allowed is for me to say things very factually, tell you things that happened to me, and not actually connect with them in any type of way. And one of the things that I learned was, as an ADHD person, I am typically experiencing multitude of emotions all at once. I'm never sad or happy or angry. I am multiple emotions all at once. And by taking these parts of my brain and trying to view them as only being, this part of me and this part of me and this part of me, I was doing myself a massive disservice by thinking I can only be one of those things all at once. When the reality is, all 5 of those voices are talking to me all at once, because all 5 of those voices are me, and all 5 of those voices are valid and necessary in my everyday life. And well, they are not always helpful and they are not always productive, ignoring them and thinking they are never helpful and productive is just as detrimental. So one of the things that I've been doing is kind of embracing that and trying to get to know me so that I can then understand myself better and embrace myself better and start working on decompartmentalizing and seeing how I can integrate these parts of me in a healthy way into every part of my life. So one of the things that you might notice throughout my video are these sketches that I have back here. So a few months ago, I was working with this kind of idea and struggling with all of these thoughts, and I was writing them down a lot, writing down what was happening, and I started to kind of notice trends and patterns throughout the scripts, I guess you could say, that I was coming up with from the conversations that these voices were having. And I started to identify the different parts of my personality. And I started comparing that to my feelings wheel, which is something that I think has been invaluable to me in actually understanding and connecting with my emotions and what that means. So it's just a little wheel that I use. Sometimes I will have all of these body sensations and not be able to understand them. And I just feel overwhelmed. So this circle kind of helps me find the body sensations and then connect that to different possible emotions. And it also allows me to see them as not just kind of these core things, but also these other emotions that can stem from those. And again, this is just a starting point. There's, it doesn't have all the emotions, doesn't have all the feelings. Some of them I don't necessarily relate to because as an ADHD person, I don't really think maybe that's why I'm doing that. But as a whole, I have found this really, really helpful, and it's helped me connect to these parts of me and help me see this. So with these pictures is I kind of identified which one of these voices kind of talks the most when I'm experiencing which one of these feelings. So I've kind of labeled them all based on that, and I started tracking it, and it's been so helpful. But again, that's just for me as someone who doesn't have a visual mind. I could never think of this just in my head. It's been something that I really have been working on in order to see, in order to connect and understand. But had I not known that these differences exist, I think I just would have continued to be hard on myself and continue to compartmentalize and continue to think that, I only let this Sarah out when I am around, my closest friends who know how weird I am. And I only let this Sarah out in public because she's the only one who's got it together. And this one is, you only let her out when revenge is the answer. And that, again, is extremely detrimental because this version of me has so many positive benefits. She protects me in so many different ways, but she is very critical. She is very aggressive. And that can be very, very overwhelming. And a lot of times she is not right and she is not the one to listen to. But to ignore her completely all the time would be to not protect myself. And again, I think that is the beauty with getting to know yourself, with getting to understand yourself and working with your brain instead of against it. And over at ENCC, that is kind of our number one goal is how can you work with your brain instead of against it? Things like ADHD are massive barriers. They are disabilities. Yes, my brain works differently, and yes, I can overcome that. But in this world, it is a disability. I need supports in other places. I cannot do the same things that other people can do in the same types of ways and in the ways that this world and society requires me to do. And a lot of these things that are put in place currently work against the ADHD brain and not with it. So our goal is to help you learn about your brain, understand how and why that creates barriers in this world. And then let's work with your brain to come up with adequate and appropriate solutions so that you can thrive in this world and not just survive. So thank you all so much for listening. I hope that you were able to learn something about yourself and others, and I hope to see you in my next video.